right is she here? She's unreliable.
Resident Evil 3. Well, look what we have here. A remake of Resident Evil 3, my second favorite video game of all time. So last year we got Resident Evil 2 2019, a somewhat faithful retelling of the original RE2's story with greatly reimagined environments, gameplay, and some pretty big changes to late game areas. While last year's entry was more reimagined than remake, I still really loved what I played. It felt like the devs of that game were paying respect to the original while modernizing the story for a new generation of players, successfully reviving survival horror and making a game that could easily stand up there with the original. Just a few months ago, we got confirmation that Capcom had also been working on a reimagining of Resident Evil 3. Now, this news got me extremely hyped because, like I said earlier, RE3 is one of my favorite games of all time, and if you watch my videos, you definitely know that already. Jill is my favorite character, that original game is one of my favorites, and I loved RE2R. So this new RE3 has a lot to live up to for me personally. Today we'll talk about some of the new things this game brings to the table and how it compares to not only the original game, but to RE2 2019. I will not be going into any mid to late game content in this video, so don't worry about being spoiled. Okay, let's do it. RE3 2020 is an action-oriented survival horror game that plays and feels almost exactly the same as RE2 2019. Like you'd expect, resource management, typewriters, item boxes, and save rooms are a big focus of RE3's gameplay. The game has tight control, quick and responsive movement, and all of the same quality of life additions found in last year's release, like that amazing map system. The game is comprised of explorable hub areas connected by set pieces and hard points of no return, much like the original RE3. Combat is virtually the same as RE2R, firing your gun feels very satisfying, and standing still to increase your accuracy emulates the classic Resident Evil games. It's all still here and improved. It even seems like Jill has better accuracy, and it makes sense because she is a highly trained officer, and not some rookie or a civilian with decent training. Just like RE399, this iteration of Jill's last escape is a bit more action-packed than RE2 2019, and that comes with this game's new and unique features. The original RE3 had a mechanic called emergency evade. It was basically a form of dodging. It had problems, mainly the input method of aiming right before an attack, and having to know an enemy's frame-perfect animation to execute the dodge successfully. This maneuver makes its return here and works a lot better than in the original. So dodging is skill-based, no stamina bars in this game at all. You can perform 3 consecutive dodges in a row in any direction. Once that third dodge comes out, Jill stumbles a bit as to not have the player abuse this action. Dodging also has a few different functions this time around too. There's the normal dodge, which sees Jill quickly stepping out of the way of incoming danger, and the perfect dodge, which when executed properly, has Jill performing a tactical roll, granting the player a slow-motion lock-on shot to an enemy's weak point. It's called perfect dodge, but I personally think it should have been called Valentine. I'm sorry about that. You can also use the slow motion to keep moving, slipping by whatever enemy just attacked you. In my first playthrough, I used perfect dodge more to get past enemies and conserve my ammo. Having a dodge in a game like this might seem a little unbalanced, but worry not, because zombie attacks are still unpredictable and kind of hard to read. I found that trying to dodge into and past zombies resulted in me getting grabbed more often than not. I'm pretty sure the side roll was most effective in getting past these shambling corpses, but I'm not completely sure. The perfect slow-mo shot isn't as powerful as you'd think, especially if you're playing on the hardcore difficulty setting. Dodging is really fun, and when you can consistently pull it off, it is very satisfying and makes you feel like a super cop. It requires a bit of practice, and I think its addition in this game is great and makes perfect sense for a character like Jill Valentine. Another thing this game does is its restoration of making the knife a main weapon again. So unlike RE2R, this game's knife doesn't have durability and isn't used as a defense item to break free from grabs, which yes, that means sub-weapons are no longer a thing for RE3 2020. I was a little miffed by this exclusion, but with the dodge it kinda makes up for it not having a breakaway option. Also, grenades are treated as a main weapon too. By the way, the perfect dodge with the knife is the coolest looking thing I've ever seen. Yeah, you can do a legit knife-only run again. Speaking of breaking away from grabs, when an enemy grabs hold of Jill, you can now mash an on-screen button that reduces the amount of incoming damage. It's like Jill is bracing herself to get bitten. You can make this input a button hold, so you don't have to mash, and I actually recommend it because mashing buttons can get a little annoying sometimes. I don't really like this feature, but it's such a small thing that doesn't really ruin the overall experience. Another new addition to this game are the item crates. So like some of the more action-heavy RE titles, there are breakable crates scattered around Raccoon City. Since ammo is scarce, the addition of these boxes is pretty cool. On higher difficulties, the contents of the crates changes. I saw this as a response to RE399's random item locations. If you guys don't remember, that game actually had that as a feature. Items would change position on the map every time you played. And the crates are similar to that, very RE4 in its execution. And the last mechanic I'll talk about are the interactable environmental objects. So as you explore the city, you will be coming across explosive barrels and stray generators to shoot at to take out and stun groups of enemies. Not much to say about this, except it's accurate because this was also in the original game. I thought the zombies in RE2R were some of the best zombies I had ever seen in a video game. These guys shamble around the environment realistically, getting caught on furniture and tripping over themselves. The incredibly detailed dismemberment system was jaw-dropping to say the least. RE3R has these exact same zombies, but things are a little different this time. In RE2, the zombies were extremely bullet spongy. It would sometimes take an entire handgun magazine to put one of these guys down. In this game, the zombies are weaker, but they do show up in greater numbers, so at some points, you'll literally have to make it through a horde of them just to get to your destination. The dismemberment tech is still here, but the gore level is surprisingly reduced. No longer will shooting a zombie's arm result in it slowly dripping off of their rotting bodies. Now, limbs just explode when removed. Body parts don't stay on the ground anymore, they just disappear outright. Dead enemies also no longer ragdoll and fall over realistically. Instead, they all have pre-canned death animations. Even though dismemberment works basically the same way, all of this is a visual downgrade. At first, it was pretty jarring, having played countless hours of RE2R. I was so used to seeing the zombies break apart, so playing this game and seeing them just jankily explode like this wasn't very good. The only reason I can think of why this has to happen is because the zombies travel in larger groups, and certain other giant monsters are also running around in these same locations with you. It's probably a lot of resources taxing the RE engine all at once. It's a visual downgrade for sure, but after playing the game for hours, I'm used to it now, and it doesn't really affect the overall experience, but it's definitely noticeable. Besides zombies, almost every RE3 enemy makes its return for Jill's enhanced escape. You've got the same RE2 zombie dogs, the absolutely disgusting, insect-like Drain Demos in the substation, the redesigned and terrifying Hunter Gamma in the sewers, and the Hunter Beta in the hospital and late-game areas. All of these creatures are fantastic, but my one complaint with some of them is that they don't really show up as much as I wanted throughout the entire game. I guess that's accurate to the original because zombies were the main threat in RE399, and the special creatures like the ones I just mentioned were carefully peppered throughout that title. It's not really that big of a deal, honestly, just something I would have liked to have seen. Going back to zombies for a sec, the undead here have a few different forms, like the Nemesis infected tentacle head variants, which reminded me a lot of Las Plagas, and a much stronger, more regenerative zombie type might show up later on in the game. All of the enemy variety is great, and the special creatures do a good job at making each section of the game memorable in my opinion. The Hunter Beta are just perfect. Yeah, they still have the lunging one-shot, so be careful when taking these guys on. Speaking of different types of monsters, Jill also gets enough weaponry in this game to deal with every one of those creatures. You'll be using multiple handguns, a shotgun, and Jill's familiar grenade launcher that has count them, four grenade types. The crafting system from previous games is still here, but the grenade launcher gets its own type of gunpowder. Mixing different A and B powders together gives you different grenades, just like the original game. Most of the weapons have upgrades too, which improve them and make them function differently as you progress through the game. You'll be ready for anything, trust me. Okay, maybe you're not ready for this. So, Nemesis. Yes, he makes Mr.X look like a small baby. Seriously, the T-103 is child's play compared to this 10-foot-tall stapled-together mess of a creature. Nemesis is an extremely imposing force in this title. His introduction is probably one of the best cutscene to gameplay sequences I have ever experienced. It's so cool. During combat, Nemesis can combo you with a series of punches, whip you with his arm tentacle, roar at you, stunning Jill for a few seconds, pull you to him with said tentacle, run, jump, and of course, he will use a small arsenal of weapons to deal damage from afar. For most of the encounters, Nemi is unarmed, but during certain sections of the game is when he'll get equipped. When Nemesis is on the prowl, he will stalk you until you enter specific areas. I remember when RE2 came out last year, a lot of people were not feeling Mr. X. Well, if you think X was bad, imagine if he could attack you at long range. If you decide to take on Nemesis and actually end up downing him, he will drop you special umbrella cases whose contents I will not disclose right now. But yeah, it was really great seeing the reward system preserved from the original game. I think Nemesis is great, but I will say that on the standard and even on the hardcore settings, he can be a little forgiving. Like, the game doesn't want you to have too tough of a time dealing with him. As much as I loved dodging rockets, I would have loved to see more of this giant monster throughout the game. The biggest problem with this big guy is that he feels severely underutilized in this title. Unlike RE399, where Nemi was basically on your ass at all times in the early game, in this game, Nemesis takes a lot of breaks. I feel like he should have been more present throughout the entire game to make his imposing force feel a little bit more meaningful. Now, in the original RE3, Nemesis did take pretty lengthy breaks during the hospital, park, and dead factory sections, but he was always present through the starting areas, and that just isn't the case here, and it's unfortunate. I want more of this monster, please. He's so much fun to run from at the beginning and fight towards the middle and end. Not bad by any means, just a little underappreciated, I think. So something I think will probably be a little divisive is this game's structure. So RE3 2020 is very well paced. The game moves at a breakneck speed, much like the original. Like I said earlier, this title is made up of explorable hub environments where you find keys, have a plethora of locks to pick, interesting files to read, and you'll be solving some fairly easy puzzles. If you're familiar with RE399, you'll know that game had some of the most brain-busting puzzles with the water sample and gem clocks riddles. And sadly, there isn't much of that in this game. A lot has changed, which is probably unsurprising if you played RE2 2019. The thing about this RE3 is that it's very different from the original. It's a completely new game from a structure perspective, almost feeling like a reboot at times. Each of the open-ended areas are great, some of the most atmospheric and enjoyable gameplay locations in the series. The hospital especially stood out in that regard. I could see people not liking the changes or the linear in-between sections. It feels a bit more RE6 in those areas. I know I'm being very vague about this stuff, and that's only because I don't want to spoil anything. There are a ton of surprises and brand new content waiting for you. I quite enjoyed my playthrough, but I myself wish it was a little more faithful to the original in the game structure department. Also, there's one part in this game that feels like total padding. It felt very out of place. Once again, a lot like an RE6 scenario. Actually, now that I think about it, it's more RE4. You guys will see what I'm talking about. I don't know why Resident Evil always feels like it has to do that. It's strange. Like there's too much survival horror in this game, throw in an action segment. This is definitely the most conflicted thing for me about this game. It's super fun to play through, but I feel the linear cinematic sections could have been toned down a bit and replaced with more freeform open-ended gameplay. When those parts are happening is when I'm the most happy with this game. With that said, like every other RE title, this one has some good replayability. All of the scripted stuff I just talked about is skippable, just like in RE2R. You could skip every cutscene, and it's great for speedruns and replays in general. The game is about 5 to 7 hours in length, depending on how thoroughly you explore the environments. I was confused because on my first playthrough, please ignore my terrible first playthrough ranking, don't worry, I got an S eventually. It sure did feel like I was playing an 8-hour game, having done almost everything the title had to offer. But my completion time said I logged over 5 hours, but in the top right corner it said my total playtime was almost 9 hours. I played this game in a single sitting with no breaks in between. So what's going on here? Well, this is when I figured out that time doesn't count during cutscenes, and there are actually a bunch of cutscenes and cinematic gameplay parts that aren't counted on your completion time. Somehow the game felt shorter and longer at the same time. It felt like I was spending hours walking through some of these environments, taking in the atmosphere and scenery. It's just strange. I guess time is convoluted in Raccoon City after all. A lot of this game's replay value comes in its higher difficulties and unlockables. Standard, I'd say, was fairly easy on my first run. Hardcore felt like the real normal mode, and the unlockable Nightmare and Inferno difficulties are the real challenge hardcore fans will be looking for, featuring remixed enemy and item locations. One terrible thing I quite disliked about this game was the exclusion of the live selection branching path system. You only get one sequence of events in this game with some very minor alterations, depending on which side streets you happen to travel down at specific points in the game. I prayed to the Resident Evil gods that this reimagining would have those branching paths. The gods, sadly, didn't answer my prayers. It's disappointing. Operation Mad Jackal is also gone, and that sucks because the new game mechanics introduced here are so good and would have been really fun to have a gauntlet-style free mode to use them in. Other than difficulties, you can unlock super weapons, stat-boosting items, and a single costume. That isn't this one, by the way. That one is literally pre-order, pay to DLC. Yeah, also not very good when RE2R offered its classic costumes as unlockables, and free 98 models. So that covers RE3R's gameplay. I really enjoyed playing this game. It's got a lot of variety in its combat and enemy design, especially in the later portions of the game, and some really great story and boss fight moments that I'll never forget. Sadly, the game does suffer from a lack of Nemesis, and some of the more random elements that made the original game so great, like the removal of branching paths and multiple story events on repeat playthroughs. Guys, we gotta talk about this game's presentation. The RE engine is proving to be one of the premier game engines for this current and the next generation of video games. The characters and monsters look breathtaking. Jill and Carlos's redesigns particularly look amazing. All of the side characters were also lovingly remade in the best possible ways. The UBCS basically being Umbrella stars is awesome. It's so great seeing characters like Nikolai and Mikhail remade like this. These side characters are real people now. It's so bizarre. Even Dario Rosso is here. Monsters like Nemesis and the Hunter Beta look great. And the Drain Demos are absolutely disgusting. The photogrammetry system Capcom's been using is just incredible. But it's not just the character models that got so much love, but the city itself. Raccoon City is littered with so many fan service callbacks, not just from Resident Evil, but from other Capcom games as well. All of the movie posters advertising things like Air Combat 1941 and Wolf of the Battlefield strike all of the Capcom nostalgia feels. It's all just so great looking, and I can't wait to see what future games will look like using this tech. I feel like every time the graphics topic comes up in my reviews, I end up saying the same things. So I'll just leave it at Jill Valentine is so beautiful, oh my god, and Carlos's hair? Are you kidding me? Look at that man. Something I was totally surprised by was the amount of music in this game. So last year, when we all played RE2R, I think the most common complaint was the extreme lack of music in that title. RE3 seeks to remedy that problem by just straight up having beautifully remixed classic tracks from RE399. Reaching the first save room and hearing Free From Fear again was like a religious experience. It was so good. Trekking down the destroyed city streets and hearing the original music that you'd hear back in '99 while exploring, alongside the downright amazing Distant City ambiance, creates such a powerful atmosphere that perfectly immerses you in this world. Raccoon City is very much alive in this game. The final thing I'll talk about is this game's story, and I won't say much about what happens for obvious reasons, but yeah, I liked it a lot. This is definitely the best Jill Valentine representation we've had in years. She's strong in a very human way. She's not completely perfect, she actually fails quite a bit, but she overcomes the obstacles in front of her while learning to respect and build up a trust with the members of the UBCS. It's really great and kind of hilarious, with my last video basically being me complaining about how Capcom used to not respect Jill in their older games. Then they turn everything around and give us probably her best portrayal since Remake. I am not kidding about that. Carlos feels more like a three-dimensional character in this game. He's got his reasons for doing what he does, and seeing him slowly figure things out is so well done. Also, him and Jill have a lot of chemistry together. It's great seeing them go from just trying to work together to becoming a truly badass team. This game also has a lot of collectible files, unlike last year's RE2 remake, and they do a lot to enrich the world of Raccoon City. Each file contains 2 to 4 pages brimming with detail and lore pertaining to Raccoon City events. It was great reading someone's lost journal detailing a small adventure the owner of the diary and their friend went on, only to find the body of said friend shortly after, with another file talking about that person's last moments before death. It's environmental storytelling like this that is greatly appreciated and does a great service in fleshing out and creating a believable world, while adding to both reimaginings of 2 and 3. Like I said earlier, this feels more like a reboot than a remake. Even if I liked almost everything in the story, I still wish it stuck more closely, if at all, to the progression of the original game's story. As you can imagine, some areas have been cut and basically everything has been redesigned, not just one or two environments like in RE2R. Overall, I think RE3 2020 is a great game, but not the best remake. It feels so much different as an overall package compared to RE399, but it also serves as a proper gameplay progression and a fitting companion piece for RE2 2019. The gameplay is solid, dodging is really fun, and seeing Jill do what she does in this game is a treat for Valentine fans. The game has some decently sized problems with Nemi's overall inclusion in the actual game parts of this video game, and the lack of story differences on repeat playthroughs makes it feel more focused, but at the same time a little empty compared to the original game. I have to say, I still really enjoyed my trek through Raccoon City again. I highly recommend playing both RE2R and 3R back to back. With that, you'll be getting a clearer picture of the events of Raccoon's destruction. So how does this game fare to its original counterpart? Do I like this game more than RE399? No. But I like this game a lot for its own reasons. The original RE3 will always be my second favorite game of all time. It does things way better than RE3R, and I think that's perfectly okay. RE3 Reimagined is totally worth a playthrough. It's a great game that is definitely less content-rich than last year's entry, but as its own thing, it's a wonderful, streamlined, modern retelling of Jill Valentine's last escape. If I had to give this game a score like a traditional review outlet, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I think that's totally fair for what you're getting out of this game. It's pretty good, not perfect, but good. I am so glad to be saying that Jill Valentine is finally back. Alpha Team now and forever. Hey guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video and are staying safe in these desperate times. It's really weird and kind of poetic that a Resident Evil game is releasing in the midst of a real-world viral outbreak. As always, if you liked this video, please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon link down below. I'll be making another RE3 video soon, dissecting and talking about all of the spoilers for this game, so please look forward to that. Anyway, y'all, it was great talking to you today, and about this cool little video game. I'll see you next time. Later!